The basics of this story are this 16-year-old girl is squabbling with one of her foster siblings. They're at their foster mother's house. They're arguing about house cleaning. Apparently, the other person wanted the house to be kept more clean, was really offended by it, and they started fighting about it. Police officer shows up. They're fighting. A knife is involved. There is body cam footage that shows Ma'Khia Bryant sort of has this person cornered against the car, and she is wielding a knife. She is pulling back, and she is lunging forward. After that, she's down on the ground, she's been shot, and she is dead. This is all boiled down to, what is the cop's obligation here? Was it to diffuse the situation, to run and tackle and maybe get stabbed himself, or to shoot in defense of the person penned? You have a take on it? Because this has been a tough one.
First and foremost, it's a really, really sad situation. I feel as if I definitely relate to people saying that she was so young. It's such a shame. And she should have known better. That's what I have to say. She should have known better. A teenager should know not to run and stab people. However, I recognize that as a foster child, she might be, suffering from some mental health issues, suffering from a myriad of things that could have caused her to lose her temper, and go for that knife. But again, you just have to know better. And I saw a lot of comments, on Twitter and YouTube about this. Oh, the officer should have shot the knife out of her hand. Let's be realistic. Let's be realistic. That cop is not John Wick. Let's be realistic. And I don't think the cop had an obligation to put himself in front of a knife, as a girl is charging at another girl. And I'm assuming he didn't know that the girl was 15. He didn't know that it was an argument about cleaning the house. He just sees a teenager lunging at another one with a knife. I mean, I don't know what he's supposed to.
I mean, I agree, right? Any situation where a 16-year-old girl is dying, it's tragic. Mm-hmm. But I really object to this being lumped into with George Floyd or Daunte Wright or these people mistakenly killed by police. Mm. This young woman, Olivia and I were 16 not too long ago. We knew that you can't try to kill someone and stab them and announce that you're doing that on the tape. She actually says, I'm going to bleep and stab you. But we all know that you can't do that. And a police officer is seeing an attempted murder in front of him. He didn't take a black life. He also saved one, right? There's not been enough talk about the 16-year-old girl on the other end of that knife. So I think situations like this, the cop is not the villain, and it's really harmful to lump it in with other situations.
While we've been talking about police reform and trying to make, policing less violent and have our communities be taken care of by maybe mental health professionals or people who are designed to break apart tense situations. This is an actual situation, a fight with a knife. This is not a mentally ill person running around a sidewalk screaming at people where you don't need an armed police officer to deal with this.
Right.
This is an armed fight and someone is about to get stabbed. I don't know why we have police officers unless it is to shoot that person in defense of the other. I would like there to be a magic world where you could instant transmission over there and get in between them and separate them or taser them down, but that's not how those things work.
There's been a lot of cases in the past year where police have come under a lot of scrutiny for not being trained well enough in de-escalating situations, especially how it relates to mental health. There's been cases where, people with autism or other, special needs have been treated very, very poorly by the police, even brutalized or killed. But this is just not one of those issues where, a therapy session could have trained this cop to de-escalate the situation when he is literally witnessing an attempted stabbing, an attempted murder.
And so now we've had this reverse of the adultification bias thing that happens in media coverage. So we've kind of all seen this. I'm trying to think of a specific case, but I'll just sort of go with a hypothetical. So a young black man is killed unarmed, and then, one of the news agencies drives out video of him, participating in illegal activity or doing things that, older white people might find scary and threatening. And they go, oh, well, he's not a kid. He's a thug, right? He's in a gang. And then we are supposed to interpret the case differently and feel differently about it. It's not just a 16-year-old. Now they're doing the reverse with Bryant. They're saying, well, she was a giggly little girl who combs her hair and does funny TikTok videos. And I get that. People, we're all two people. We're all we have different sides of us, but we also all make choices. And you don't just randomly go from making TikTok videos to wielding a knife and going at somebody. You're throwing that out the window and your chance for not due process, but patience from a police officer when you make that choice.
And a lot of these progressives are the same people that want to make the age to vote 16. We have to talk about the fact that I reject the notion that a 16-year-old is an infant. A 16-year-old is not. They're not a full-grown adult, right? Their brain is still developing, but they know that you can't stab someone with a knife or try to do so. And they know that police, you need to not escalate a situation when police arrive. So I think personal responsibility, it is absolutely a tragic situation, but personal responsibility still matters. And I don't like this infantilization of victims and of people who have agency.
Olivia, did you see that piece in the New York Times where the writer is sort of writing about the experiences of young black girls in America, called it a burden, right? The burden of being a young black girl. And it described the entire Bryant situation as sort of indicative of many people's experiences where black girls are treated as older, as bigger, as more physically threatening than white children are. I can't relate to that. I was curious if you had read it, what you thought about it.
I can definitely relate to that. I think it's an interesting intersection of being black and a woman in this country. As a young child, into my early teen years, 14, 15, I was constantly made out to be and painted as like the stereotypical angry black woman when I wanted to voice my opinions or when I was playing sports. I was a very competitive athlete, since I was like 3 years old in a multitude of different sports. And there were several times where people would literally say to my face, "I'm scared of you. You're being aggressive. You're being bossy. You're being angry."
And you're a fighter.
And several times, and this is not an exaggeration, several of those times, specifically, I remember of my high school JV volleyball team mentioned that she was scared of me because I was black and I could be aggressive with her. We were teammates. It was not a combat sport. So this is constantly a thing that I face. I'm not really going to act like a victim about it because everybody deals with their own stereotypes. Right. I mean, I think that white men are being very vilified right now. We all have, our different issues to struggle with. But in this case, I don't think it applies. I really don't think it applies because in my case, I was just playing volleyball. In this young lady's case, she was trying to stab somebody.
I wish we could stop taking these meta narratives, which listen, that sounds perfectly valid. I can't sit here and say that's not true. I mean, I'm happy to believe it and talk about it, but I wish we could stop taking meta narratives and imposing them on individual outcomes and situations, regardless of the facts and circumstances, because I really think that's not productive. And I think it just doesn't work.
Well, it makes it hard to talk about every individual case and understand what happened. I mean, after the Atlanta killings, there were a slew of stories about sort of the Asian experience in America from its founding, particularly when a lot of Chinese Americans or, Chinese came here to this country to work on the railroads in the 19th century. And I'm trying to wrap my head around what happened in Atlanta. Why did this guy kill all of these spa workers? And you're talking to me about like the history of the country. And it just makes it hard to discuss this one single case and be like, was this racism or was this just something like, fundamentalist Christian, like wiling out? You can't have these meta discussions and the details at the same time. And the media wants to have it both ways.
And that's why the conversation is not going anywhere productive.
Has it ever? I was just real quick because we've kind of changed course a little bit towards what's going on in Elizabeth City. Maybe it's because the Bryant story is not exactly yielding like the narrative that the media wanted. They seem to have moved on pretty quickly. But right now, Elizabeth City, North Carolina is shut down. They're expecting a lot more protests to go brewing. And this is all over some body cam footage that has just been like limited release to the family. So this guy was being served an arrest warrant. This is Andrew Brown Jr. for drugs, and he was going to have his house searched as well. When cops arrived, he is pulling out of the driveway, presumably to get out of Dodge. They surround the car, and he ends up dead by the end of the exchange. What we have learned so far is that he might have had his hands on the steering wheel, and then he was shot in the head. And his family has seen 30 seconds of the body cam footage and said he was executed. Nobody else has seen anything. And it just kind of, for me, well, there's the drug war element too, but like there's also the body cam thing. Body cams are not doing what people thought they would do. Everybody sees something different.
I mean, that's very true. And I really, really am curious to see that body cam footage because if it is so clear cut that his hands were on the steering wheel, he wasn't armed, he wasn't shooting, then of course that's execution. But I'm really curious to see it before I can make up my mind,
But I guess I would say that that's not a case of body cams not doing what they're supposed to because Body cams aren't even required in many places, and the disclosure of the footage should be required. I mean, any police shooting, I think there should be mandated body cams, and then release the footage to the public should be mandatory. It's accountability. These people are our employees. That's not an anti-police thing. Just as often, we don't always hear about it in the headlines, but body cams vindicate officers. They show that they didn't do anything wrong. This person is making a false accusation against them. Right. So I think transparency is only good. And in this case, the problem is not that body cams didn't stop it. It's that we only have 30 seconds of footage being seen by some people and no one really knows what happened.